in Genesis 1, when God made family, he gave them a mission and told them, here, this is what I want you to do, and I want you to do it together. He wanted the first family to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it, to take God's order and spread it to all of creation.
All right, hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Daily Commute Quarantine Conversations. My name is Will.
My name is Adam.
And we're super excited to be here talking with you guys today. And we're here with Jeremy Pryor. And Adam, do you want to go ahead and introduce Jeremy to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for the most part, I'll let him introduce himself, but Will and I know Jeremy through this, I guess I'll call it an organization named FamilyTeams, which is really just out there helping people build families as a team on mission for Christ. And so they had a weekend experience, kind of like a workshop or a conference. We never really know how to describe that to people when we tell folks about it. But it was this wonderful thing they hosted down in Cincinnati last fall that we attended with our wives. It was phenomenal. Really shifted the way that we think about family, about making disciples, and about what the Bible has to say about all those things. We especially really liked everything that Jeremy and his wife had to say. It's very clear Jeremy's a very wise, knowledgeable, biblically rooted guy. And we just wanted to be able to share some of his knowledge with you guys and discuss kind of what's going on with the family right now in the middle of this coronavirus, which is what's happening right now. At the time of this recording, quarantine is still happening, being lifted slowly, those sorts of things. So yeah, Jeremy, if you could maybe introduce yourself a little bit beyond that. What do you do? How long have you been quote unquote commuting, which is what we call this process of walking with Jesus daily? If you could share some of those things.
Yeah, super excited to be here with you guys. We're just down the road in Cincinnati, Ohio. So a little bit about us. I grew up in a Christian family and have been, my life I gave completely over to the Lord when I was a sophomore in high school. And since then have been really trying to figure out what it looks like to follow Jesus wholeheartedly, and have been confused, honestly, from the beginning about exactly how family fits into that. Especially when I was younger, I was like, okay, I get it. You're a radical disciple. You'd give up everything. You just go die in the mission field maybe someday. Like, that's kind of how it works. I don't know how you balance family life and diapers and mortgages and all that jazz when you're out busy making disciples and trying to fulfill the Great Commission. So, but when I was 23 years old, I was in Israel, and I just had an experience of encountering another very sort of Bible-based culture that had a much healthier approach to family. And I didn't understand how that was, because we both have the same Bible. So like Christians also have all the teaching and wisdom from the Hebrew scriptures as well as the New Testament. And so the deeper I got into that conversation with Jewish families, the more I realized that there's a whole just treasure chest full of wisdom for family that I had never encountered before. So that's where I met my wife, April. She's actually from Columbus, from Hilliard, Ohio. So I was from Seattle, so God had to take us to Jerusalem to meet each other. So I've spent a lot of time up in Columbus and love that area, and we try to get up there as often as we can. But yeah, we have 5 kids. We lived, like I said, here in Cincinnati. In terms of work, I'm mostly an entrepreneur. I've started a bunch of different companies, and especially recently, now that my kids are older, my oldest is 20. We have kids all the way down from 20 to 11. We do a lot of work together as a family. So FamilyTeams is one of those organizations. We also have a quilt store at the top of our street in this quaint little town called Fort Thomas, where we live, and it's a multi-generational family business. My mother-in-law works there. My oldest daughter, Kelsey, works there a lot, and then my wife, April, runs it. And then I run a little micro farm with my 2 youngest daughters. I have a real estate company with my son, Jackson. And so, just get to work together as a team. And all of that really flowed out of a different perspective that we encountered about 20 years ago, and it completely turned our lives upside down.
Wow, that's so cool, and I love hearing about all the stuff that you're doing with your family, and yeah, that's really neat. I do have one question for you. So you're from Seattle, you're not from Cincinnati. What are your thoughts on Skyline chili?
It's a very much an acquired taste. So when I first moved to Cincinnati, people would talk about it, and it sounded like the grossest, weirdest, like colloquial, like, and it's so bizarre that it's only here. I know it's infected Columbus a bit, and it's kind of made its way up I-71 somehow. But yeah, I wasn't too excited about it. But people kept on inviting me to lunch. I kept on having to go to this strange place, and and so yeah, cinnamon and sugar in meat sauce with it's a kind of a weird combo. But it does kind of grow on you when you're force fed it for a couple of years. And so about 2-3 years, you find yourself like strangely craving it. And then you realize how unhealthy it is. And then you're like, oh, now I've got a whole nother battle on my hands. And so I try to avoid Skyline, but my family, they all got the bug. And so we do end up there every couple of months.
That's nice. That's hilarious. Taste. That's funny. Yeah, I am a huge Skyline fan, and it was my first job was working there. So free Skyline all the time was my dream. Adam doesn't like it, and I
you don't
like
get
to
the
shame
appeal
him for that.
No, I think your use of the term infection was incredibly appropriate.
Yeah, poor Skyline. Anyway. So anyway, we can talk about some more things of actual substance. So Jeremy, how has your family been responding to the coronavirus? What challenges have there been for you guys?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest challenge is we live multi-generationally. So my parents live in our house, my mother-in-law lives here, and so and my mother-in-law has like a respiratory condition, my dad has a heart condition, and so they are really at the top of the sort of a problem area when we're trying to have people really quarantine away from the virus. And then we've got this young family, and all this stuff we've got going on. So we've been under a pretty strict quarantine until, recently now things are starting to open back up. But for us, it hasn't been, terribly disruptive because we do so much of our work remotely. So I just feel like really blessed that we had, assets we own and things that all can be done remotely. Our main company is called Epifio, which is a video production studio downtown. And Epifio just went completely remote when this hit. We've got about 40 employees, and I don't think they're going back. That's what I hear. So it's worked out pretty well for them, and then the sewing studio, because of the masks kind of thing, that just exploded, and we just found ourselves, we started a bunch of campaigns to sew masks for lots of the hospitals and the nursing homes in the area. So we've been really active in that. And then with our kids, I've always wanted to grow our own food. And so I got really obsessed with micro farming. And so we took a whole room of our house and just set up racks and lights. And we've been growing, a good 10, 20 pounds of produce probably a week. So we're starting to share that with all of our neighbors. And so that's been a lot of fun. So that's kind of how we've been responding.
Oh, man.
Wow, that is so cool. Growing your own food. Wow, that's intense.
Yeah,
I love it, though.
That's the dream, I think.
Yeah.
For me, that's speaking right to my heart. I love gardening. And so that's
nice.
That is a really neat thing to be able to do. Do you find that, I'm not sure how your relationship is with your neighbors, but do you feel like, has that opened up some doors for you guys in terms of relationships?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So just yesterday we were going out and just delivering food to a bunch of our neighbors, and we're just getting flooded with texts. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And so it's so great to have something that is like handmade kind of, that you're producing as a family, that you're offering to them for free, and that's been super. And they've been sending us texts constantly as they're cooking with them, and they're all we're all sharing recipes with each other, and it has been a really bonding experience. We live on an amazing street. We've got good close friends as neighbors, as well as others that we just know now for a while. We lived here for about 8 years, so it's been awesome.
Yeah,
That's
really
fantastic.
cool. That's so fun. Rachel's growing a strawberry in our kitchen window. It's
where it starts.
It's nothing so far, but
if you can make a strawberry inside, that's actually quite an accomplishment. That's not easy.
We'll see how it goes.
I was gonna say it's getting there. We were just over there, and it'll take some time before I think the housers are feeding their neighbors with produce.
Yeah. That just made me think of something. This is a little off topic, but not our neighbor, I think, may actually be trying to feed us. There has been a bowl of saltines on our deck, which is shared with our neighbor. No idea why it's there, but it's just sitting there and collecting rain. And so maybe she's trying to share her food with us. I don't know, but anyhow, that's just weird.
Soggy saltines. That's exciting.
Love
yes.
Gotta start somewhere.
Right. She's like, well, I can't grow anything. I know what I'll do. So we you've kind of taken this approach of kind of staying indoors, locking down a little bit in order to protect your vulnerable family members. So I guess what about those for I think the struggle that we've been seeing is, there's those of us that live 2 hours away or 20 minutes away, from our grandparents, from our parents, and parents living away from their kids and stuff like that. And so I think that's one of the tensions that's going on right now, and that's difficult, and it's changing as things open up and stuff like that, and even maybe harder to navigate. But then there's also the tension of living at home and being stuck inside with your family for those that are living with their family members. And I'm sure that has difficulties and stuff, as well as you figure out how to navigate, okay, what boundaries do we place? How do we, still have space to breathe, but we're still living all indoors. I think, I've heard people kind of struggling with that as well. And so it feels like for, that Adam and I have been talking about, there's a lot of potential for division amongst families right now. And looking at the other end of this pandemic, I see families coming out stronger and more unified, or coming out distant, broken, divided, and maybe even hurt by one another. So, with your experience, what advice do you have for maintaining unity amongst families, whether they're living together or apart?
Yeah. Well, especially those that are stuck in a house together, this kind of gets back to the big picture question: what kind of family do you want to build? And it's important to understand that for most people in our culture, the vision we have for our family is really a vision of hyper independence. We want our kids to grow up and leave the nest and fly away and become their own person. And so being trapped together feels like mostly it's sort of in violation of that, And so whereas there's another vision, which is you could choose to be a team and believe that God actually placed in your family each member so that you could work together, and that this is actually a great opportunity. But if you have that individual kind of paradigm, or if that's the vision for family, you're going to find that difficult. I would say probably the most practical thing, if you want to be a team and you're trapped in a house together, that you need to be doing on a regular basis is actually calling family meetings every single day, or a huddle every day. We do actually 2 of these a day with our family. So my wife does one in the morning with all the kids. They do like a worship time together. Just they have a conversation. They're doing like Bible memory stuff. And then I host a huddle at 12:30 every afternoon with our whole family. And then we do call outs, like, shout outs for who's, how did yesterday go? What worked? What didn't work? And then what are we working on together this afternoon? Like, what kinds of issues do we need to deal with? And so you have to give a lot of leadership. And if you imagine if a team were stuck together for 8 hours a day or something, there would be a constant, like a coach would be constantly huddling up his team saying, okay, what's going on? How, why are you two fighting so much? Like, what are we pushing into right now? But we often, because we don't think our family is a team, those things don't occur to us normally. But man, it's been huddling up twice a day with our family team for the last 2 months has been incredible. Like I said, we've been able to launch a lot of new initiatives together because of just that constant interaction, conversation. We've been able to like resolve a lot of those tensions that you're describing, but you have to put some intentionality around it.
Yeah, I like that. That's really interesting. The idea that I really like the idea that, God has placed every member of your family as a part of this team, and so, and they all have their own role as a part of something bigger. And I think a lot of our listeners, this idea might be new to them of this, this idea of the classical family, as you say, of like, being a unified team and all working together for one mission. And so is there, for a family that maybe that's new to, how can they start that right now in the middle of this? Like, is there a way to bring everybody together, like towards that mission? What's like the next step for that?
Yeah. Well, first you have to believe that that's actually the way God designed it. So that's where it started for me. In Genesis 1, when God made family, he gave them a mission and told them, here, this is what I want you to do, and I want you to do it together. He wanted the first family to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it, to take God's order and spread it to all of creation. And I think if you or I or people in our culture would have tried to think of a way to spread God's order, we wouldn't have thought family. We would have thought a business or a nonprofit or some other kind of entity. And so that's the first thing, is just to embrace that as design. That's really critical. But I would say the thing that really galvanizes teams is they know what it means to score. Like if you're at that first sort of team meeting and you're about to kick off a season, and the coach gets up there and just sort of like says, guys, okay, this is the vision. We're going to like win the championship. Something happens to everyone at that moment. Like they all become like, oh my gosh, like we can do it, guys. We can, and the clarity that sports teams have around the mission, the goal, what it means to score, what it means to win, what it means to succeed is what really inspires all of that self-sacrifice that happens throughout the season. The problem is families today don't have a goal. We don't know what it means to score. We don't like sit down and talk about what is the vision. And so for so many families, you have to have a vision. You have to be able to score. There's got to be those celebrations. And if the goal, and this is the default goal in our culture, is really the goal is every individual go and succeed at your own thing. And if that's the goal, then every time the team gets together and asks the individual members to sacrifice for the team, you're actually taking away from the goal. You're actually hurting the individual from achieving the vision of the family. And again, that's the default vision that most of us have. That's what our culture really presents as the ideal. And so that's why you have to kind of decide if what matters is to release every individual of the family into their own thing, and then the family just hits the reset button every generation. Then I would say be careful not to insert lots of team language into your family, because you're just going to find yourself with an unbearable tension. But I would say if you really believe like I do that God designed the family to be a team, then yeah, you got to start to bring on board a lot of new tools. And one of the first ones being, you got to decide what the mission is, what the goal is, what are we trying to accomplish, why has God made this family, why did he put each of these individuals here, how can we succeed, what are we mapping out as our map to that victory or to those goals.
That's really good. I calling back to something you had said earlier, because you're just talking about mission, but also really centering around, okay, what is the goal? Because if it is independence, of course, being trapped in a home is going to feel like you're trapped in a home. But if it's to work together as a team, then really it's an opportunity to galvanize together towards that shared mission. But I think this has been my experience, and Will, I think from our conversations, your experience as well. It's husband and wife in a home, and then family somewhere else. And so I guess how would you, for people who are in our stage of life right now, where we've got extended family, you've mentioned multi-generational family a couple times now. If our multi-generational family is separated physically and we've already begun to separately identify a mission, what we feel is, even right now in the coronavirus, what we feel is appropriate, even in slight ways. How do we all get onto the same mission there? Is that possible?
Yeah, so it's important to understand that it took us generations to get to this sort of hyper-individual state, and we're not going to be able to fix it right away. Repairing this becomes a multi-generational project, and there are a couple things to think about. I would say that when in a generational family, and I believe that families are, in God's mind and His heart, they're essentially multi-generational. I mean, that's the way God thinks of family. We see that all the way. That's why He's called it God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is not something that people in the West believe about family, and this is not something that Christian Western people believe about family. We don't believe it's multi-generational. That's why when we get to the genealogies in the Old Testament, our eyes just glaze over. We can't imagine anything less relevant because we don't think about family this way. Yeah. But you have to then, if you really believe you are in a multi-generational family line and you want to recover that, but like what you're saying, Adam, if you feel like, okay, that's not the vision that I've been given, that's not kind of where my parents maybe are coming from, then what you have to do is you have to see yourself, okay, at your guys' age and stage, you're kind of like in this middle generation. And the way you think about this is there's upstream generations, kind of horizontal generations, there's siblings, and there's downstream generations, okay? With upstream generations, the most important thing to do is honor. That's what we're commanded to do. And that's the way you invite upstream generations into a multi-generational family story, is you honor the upstream generations. Tell us the stories, you ask your parents about your past, about what it was like for you growing up. You don't cast a vision upstream. That gets really weird really fast.
Sure.
That rarely works. Yeah. And oftentimes through honoring, they'll start to catch the vision. This would happen in our case. We just honored both sets of our parents and our children's grandparents for probably a good 10 years before they were like, hey, what is this family? Like, we want to be more a part of this thing. Like, but we just, that's honoring upstream. Then I would say horizontally, if you have siblings that are potential partners, then you can have those conversations. And I think that becomes like a very much an invitation. So it's like honoring upstream, invitation horizontally. And what everyone can do is you can be very idealistic going downstream. So you can decide to craft with your children and your grandchildren a very different story. And so, and it's important to realize that the most successful multi-generational father in human history, Abraham, could not go upstream at all. His father was actually an idol worshiper, and so he only could go downstream. And so you haven't lost the opportunity if for some reason maybe you just can't get there with upstream generation, but it is going to take longer, and you are going to have to be very consistent and have a lot of vision for your future generations. But the great thing to remember is that life is designed really well this way. In other words, as your parents get older, their interest in sort of telling those family stories, being connected to their grandkids usually goes up over time, and their obsession with work or individual things kind of actually starts to lessen as they get older. The same thing's going to happen to you and me as we get older and our grandkids start. We're going to get so the way the world is designed, the way God made the world, it really does this naturally kind of it gets easier and not harder oftentimes to emphasize this vision. But sometimes people get the vision like, oh my gosh, I got to make it happen now. And so they tell their parents like, get on board, like we're a multi-generational family now. And brothers and sisters, like I'm leading the charge, and kids, it's just, that's too fast, too much. And, but man, be consistent, and begin to build downstream and invite and then honor. And this stuff starts to happen pretty naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. Honor the upstream, invite everyone around you, and then craft and create and really drive that mission downstream. That's perfect. Thank you.
It sometimes it's like terrifying to invite like grandparents to tell stories, because sometimes they won't stop talking. And so sometimes for me it's like, I do not want to open this can of worms, and sometimes it can go down all these rabbit trails. But man, the times that I've like inquired of my grandparents' past and their stories, like it has been such a blessing, like really, really intense, you know, and yeah, that is super, super beneficial, especially as you like craft, I think, your vision that you pass down to your kids. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, it is interesting. There's a couple of things as people are stuck at home. Kind of go back to our previous conversation. A buddy of mine just said that has a similar experience. His parents live quite a ways away, and they're pretty strictly quarantined. And he had a problem, which was he was getting really frustrated putting his kids to bed. It was taking forever. And so he had this crazy idea. This has happened last week. He's like, so I just started FaceTiming my dad, and I'm just like, hey, do you mind telling a story to, you know, my 4-year-old, you know, your granddaughter, grandson, and just like on the pillow, put the phone there and walked away. And he's like, oh my gosh, now he's calling his uncles and like they're telling stories. Now they're starting to like record these stories. This happened the last week. I'm going to do a podcast around it because I was just so encouraged. Here's a really simple idea. But to your point, like you turn what it could be a disadvantage or frustrated, like, wow, my dad just wants to, or my mom, these are long stories, and your kids might just totally eat it up. And that's really what it's for. That it's to create this bond between those generations, especially those that are 2 or 3 generations removed from each other. They don't have a lot of time necessarily. We don't know how much time they have to make that connection and to, you know, help establish the root structure of our children in this family. And man, our parents have in their own hearts and heads in their past the ability to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. That's all really good. I feel like everything we've talked about is getting towards in one way or another, you know, driving one towards this mission that we're talking about, but also secondarily the benefit is that they all will reduce some of this tension that I think so many of us are feeling. And despite maybe some disagreements or different opinions, you know, these are all, I think, really good tools to help reduce that tension. And Will, that's what you said at the beginning, you know, we have an opportunity to come out of this closer together, but there's also a risk that if we don't take this on intentionally, really there's a risk that this season can drive us further apart. So I feel like everything we've talked about so far has been bringing us closer to the good end of that goal, which is to bring us closer together.
Totally. Yeah, just one other tool that for us has been really critical, especially for parents of teens. So we've been quarantined with literally 5 teenagers in the house. We've got my nephew here as well. And so that's about as close to hell as a lot of parents would imagine their lives. And it has not been bad for us. Like I said, we've been kind of preparing for this our whole lives. But I would say there's still attitudes, there's still frustrations, there's still all those, you know, kind of things that happen when you have lots of teenagers that are sort of stuck and have tons of time on their hands. And you might think because we're here together all the time, like that we're spending enough time with our teens. But I would say that one tool that's critical for us is that when we notice there's an attitude or an issue going on, we take, you know, that teen one-on-one and, you know, let's just go for a walk. You know, I need to get to your heart. I need to understand what's happening. If you're constantly just watching the family dynamic happen and evolve, and you're not actually addressing the systemic patterns that are happening in the home intentionally, they just continue. And that what happens to a lot of families is they lose hope, and when they lose hope, they get angry, and then you have a house where there's just volcanic explosions of anger, or however people express their anger. Some people do it by just isolating. All of these are really, really destructive things. We have to deal with it. And so, you know, so definitely for us, there's just been, I would say 2 or 3 times a week minimum, where it's just like, ooh, me and my wife are like, okay, you take that one, like take them for an hour or 2, like I'll take this, like let's work out what's happening, what's going on in your heart, what's happening, how are you feeling, really connect to their heart, really coach them through, and not to do that at the time where the tension's happening or the anger's happening. We usually wait, you know, 2 or 3 hours or sometimes a day or 2 after an event to really let everything simmer down and then just really dive into their heart, because it's their heart that we want to reach. And man, that's what I love about teenagers. You can really reach their heart at that age and in a way that can really impact the way they think and feel. But oftentimes in the heat of the moment, everyone's just, really rigid. And so just being disciplined about follow through and follow up on especially things that kind of patterns you're noticing in the family. That's been really key for us too.
That's great. I think that a lot of this is, it just sounds like there is so much power in having a unified mission and being unified as a family. And if the family doesn't have, that sort of mission, there's power in, I think, acknowledging the differences and the patterns and the difficulties and stuff like that right now. And I just love the idea of going upstream and honoring them and telling those stories. And I think that, I just see a lot of unifying power in that. Now that's exciting to think about how we can do that right now. And it's hard because, like, for me, that makes me want to go talk to all my grandparents, but it's still like uncomfortable, to get so close to them. It's still scary because, you don't know what to believe, but I love the FaceTime idea, and that might be something that just needs to become a rhythm.
Yeah, I think another thing that really helps get the kind of prime the pump, if that's ever an issue, is to just really think about prompts. And the way that we generally think about them is things that are happening in the world. So, it's Memorial Day weekend. And so you might say, this is a great time to say, hey, do you know anyone who was lost in a war, or anyone from our family? How did those events affect you? Hey, it's summertime. What was summer like for you as a kid? We're starting to ride bikes around the neighborhood. Did you have a bike when you were growing up? So sometimes just to say, hey, tell us family stories, some grandparents are like, that's all it takes, and then the floodgates. But I think that for others, and just to kind of over time, it's like having, I think that what I encourage, especially the parents of children, to do is to think of the prompts. And then kind of, you might shoot those over email, over text. Hey, would you tell Sally a story about, about what springtime, what back to school was like, what, whatever this, something that, that probably they have a shared experience. And then that prompt usually like, oh, wow. Yeah. And I got pictures. And we've just had just the most amazing, story times as a family, especially because that really honors them to know that you've actually thought about the topic, and you're giving, that they may need, a little bit of lead time and to sort of consider what to say. So that's just all part of that package of what it looks like to honor upstream.
Yeah. That's really good. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for the time that you've shared with us here. This has been really helpful for me. I know you've got some things churning in my brain that I know there's some ways to engage a family that I haven't been doing so far. And I think and I hope that's true for our listeners as well. So I guess just to finish off, how can our listeners get really more connected with you and all of the different things you're doing, including Family Teams, but any of the many other things you've said so far?
Yeah, I definitely, I'm so glad you guys came down to the Family Teams weekend in Cincinnati. Obviously, things are a little weird right now, like with big events. But we do have one scheduled in October in Cincinnati again. So it's just 2 hours away. It's a Friday night and all day Saturday event. That would be the biggest thing, because I've just found that if you don't have time with your spouse to really think about family from a big picture perspective, then it often, you just don't, it's just, you kind of just go through the motions, right? We all think we understand what family is, and so we just we don't actually take a big step back and say, okay, what kind of family should we or do we want to build? Does the Bible talk about? And so I love having that chance to have that conversation and inspire that conversation. So I think it's the second weekend of October. You can find it at familyteams.com, and it's going to be a really, really fun weekend. And I think by then, churches will be meeting, and I'm pretty sure that event will happen. Awesome. And we've got a beautiful historic theater downtown that we've rented out, you guys saw it. It's just a sweet space to have this conversation and to get that going. So that, I would say FamilyTeams.com is a great place. Coming to the weekend would be probably the best way to, if you want to take another step into this conversation, those are probably the best ways to kind of see what we're doing in a way that I think would probably apply to everyone that you guys are talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more or advocate for that experience more. There really is nothing like having a focused, intentional time towards setting a mission, and all of the other details that go around that, and the tools that you guys give are really helpful for driving that conversation.
Yeah. And the idea of accomplishing something, or rather not accomplishing something in your lifetime, but starting something that can be accomplished through multiple generations to come is just a really, really powerful thing to think about. And that was my biggest takeaway from the weekend, and I think is something that I think can apply a lot to, as we think about, the coronavirus right now and this situation, the ways that we're staying unified as a family right now can impact further generations and impact our family for the long haul. So,
Well, thanks again, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Guys. Thank you guys so much. It was a great conversation.
Thank you guys for listening to The Daily Commute. You can connect with us on Facebook by going to The Daily Commuters or Instagram at @TheDaily_Commuters. If you're a visual person, we are on YouTube. We're recording this right now through Zoom. So you can find the link to our YouTube channel through any of our social media pages. If you have a question or a topic that you'd like us to talk about, you can send us an email at askdailycommute@gmail.com or just send us a DM. We'll see you guys next time.